if you did do a bisexual comic or you know, something saying that it's okay to be with a 17-year-old or something, you know.
That would be pushing.
I mean, would there be a market for that? Would there be a way of an artist who had that point of view to express that and actually get it out there? I'm kind of taking issue with the...
As long as you don't try and make money.
Yeah, okay.
You can do anything as long as...
But could you get it published? You know, would somebody like Fantagraphics publish something like that?
If it's good. I mean, somebody asked Dennis once that during one of the many raging debates about standards and labeling, and the panel was almost over before it started because in 3 minutes everyone on the panel had agreed they had no problem with labeling. So in desperation, Maggie Thompson of the Buyer's Guide turned to Dennis Kitchen and said, Dennis, you publish some really... You publish like really wild stuff. I mean, don't you have any standards? Which, you know, and do you tell people? Is there something you tell people when they're going to send you material of some standard within the publishing house? And Dennis thought about it a minute. And he said, yes, it has to be good. And I think if you're doing, I think for an artist who's doing something good, you know, who really does have a true vision, or is doing something fresh and original, yes, there will be a market. You know, they will be able to get it published, whether or not they'll get to eat.
They may be sending your checks, they may be sending you your very small checks, and they may be sending them to the jailhouse, but you can get it published.
Yeah, the worst that'll happen is you won't be able to get it distributed. I mean, there's a lot of bad things that can happen if you want to think about it, so you know, we just try not to. Yeah, lose your tenure. This is why for a long time we didn't hear a lot about Frank Stack because he at least back in the late 60s and early 70s, I guess he had some fears that the administration of the school where he teaches might not understand the new adventures of Jesus.
So we published them under the name of Fulton Sturgeon for many years because he had to protect his tenure at where is he?
I don't think he was there at the time. I don't think he was at Columbia then.
Don't you think the editors, though, at these who do the publishing can't help but be swayed by their own subjective beliefs? You know, I mean, I found this with my editors certainly that I'll take a cartoon to an editor, and it is good, I assure you. You know, in terms of what is artistically good, it is good. And I'll take it to the editor, and because he has a different political point of view, he says, that's not very funny. Or that's just not good.
Well,
that's just not a good cartoon.
That's just knowing good market too. I mean, there are stories I want to do or adaptations of things I want to do, and I wouldn't. I usually pass things in front of Kitchen first because I have a long relationship with them. But most of the time, I know they're not the appropriate publisher, and there is among the independents, or at least used to be. These days may be gone forever, but the independent publishers used to kind of refer people to each other. If somebody came to them with a property that, okay, it's not a kitchen sink property, but it might be a good Eclipse property, or it might be a good Fantagraphics property.
I've just found
a lot more of that sort of.
I'm just skeptical that if you went, editors can. I think editors are left-brain people, basically. You know, they're more into the written word, and they're into doing a business. And I think people who do that are much better rationalizers than right-brain people. They think they're being objective, but they're completely subjective on some things. And that's why I wonder if you represented a real minority or a real threat, you know, to the status quo. If you were really subversive, I question whether you could get
probably
published.
not, because we're not, because we already are catering to people who can read. You know, which is the most subversive thing of all. Yeah, I think we want to move on and
The audience.
kind of wrap up with some question and answer. You've been out there listening so patiently. Yes?
I have a few things to say, but I'll keep them quick and painless. One is more, Pete, that Linda Berry she's in a better mood now. I met her a few months ago at the caboose, and you know, I told her I enjoy your work, and I'm a cartoonist also. Like, oh, great, good for you, wow, you know, what's your name, how are you doing? So, you know, maybe.
Yeah, but you didn't call her up at home.
I just walked right up to her and walked. And also, with all due respect to you, I think the definition, fine line, comic artist, cartoonist can be detrimental in that, like the subtitle for this exhibit, if you come in here thinking comic art, you may not expect stuff like Carol Moshlin's. And if somebody referred to Gilbert as a comic artist, they might be not as willing to read one of his novels as serious literature. Or Mr. Wilson's stuff. I don't find it funny all the time. So it's not...
It's supposed to be funny all the time.
It's not comic art like...
Well, they should have said comic book art probably, which is what we're actually talking about.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, what would be a good term?
Yeah.
But like Ralph Steadman said...
Graphic novels.
Sequential art.
Anyone who uses exaggeration or simplification to make a point, like Picasso, George Grosz, they were cartoonists, but they weren't funny. And I wanted to
Well,
ask
that was pretty
Mr.
funny.
Wilson if he considers his work to be satiric, or how he considers it to be
Just what do you think you're doing?
educational.
Well, maybe I've categorized myself as an oddball visionary. If there's any humor, some of it's funny, but it's just like black humor, you know. I don't see it as political. But it's either not political or it really is political, but it's political in the sense that a conflict between personalities or between sexes or ideas or something, rather than I don't consider myself a political cartoonist, since I'm having an absolute target, you know, of an individual. I might satire, you know, satirize certain ideas or attitudes. In that sense, it's political or it's satirical. But I don't really consider myself a satirist, actually. And I consider myself, I guess, a cartoonist, possibly a pornographer, even though I don't like the term pornography. You know? It's like, you know, what's it mean? It's like communism, you know, or something.
You were saying that the purpose should be to enlighten.
Yeah,
How does your work
or to make them sick or something.
You want to give them some kind of experience, is what you say.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep ahead of the audience in a way, rather than try to entertain them. I think people assume wrongly, I think, a lot of times that the so-called cartoon reading audience are a bunch of buffoons, which is not true at all. I think they're just probably as sharp as you are, but they just didn't get around to drawing the stuff because they do something else for a living. I think any idea you can come up with graphically or you know, or narrative or whatever, I think you'll find an audience, you know, if it's clear enough, you know. Does that make sense?
Sounds good.
Okay. Can you come up with somebody somewhere knows what you're talking about? I think just by the very nature that we're all human beings and we know we're going to die.
Yes.
I have a question for you, Gil. You talked a lot about rock and roll today, and I'm wondering what effects the punk scene in LA has had on you and your brother's work. I mean, it comes up so much, but aesthetically or socially or culturally?
Well, it was the first time, I think, for a lot of people, since maybe the late 60s, I don't know, that people were actually involved in the music scene. I mean, where instead of like buying a ticket, being 3 million miles away, you know, Mick Jagger or whatever, it was something you were involved with, and you controlled it by like, you know, people would dress up a certain way and then create their styles and take it away from another style and stuff. And the music had to follow it instead of the other way around, like us dressing up like, you know, Keith Richard or something. It was the other way around. And people were really involved with it. It was like a little community thing. I mean, even though there was all the backstabbing, hatred, you know, like any kind of community. But we just were involved with it. I mean, we saw it, you know, it was like seeing it that close this time, you know. And, you know, and since it was intertwined with our lives, it was just natural way to, you know, do comics. I mean, you know, do stories. And also because, you know, like I said, there's blank spaces. You look around, there's nothing, there's nobody else doing it or as much. So, you know, we just did it because it's something we knew about.